Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Curt 4-pole trailer wiring harness on a 2023 Subaru Impreza. Now if you've added a hitch to your Impreza, it's not a bad idea to pick up some 4-pole trailer wiring harness. That way, in case you ever pull a trailer, you can hook up to this 4-pole, giving you your running lights, your turn signals, and brake lights. And this is a nice easy system because it plugs directly into your factory taillights with factory style connectors. So there's not a whole lot of cutting and splicing that you really have to do. The hardest part of this is really just running a power wire up to the battery to get 12-volt signal. But this has an inline fuse as well as being module protected. So if your trailer has faulty wiring, you don't have to worry about this backfeeding to your vehicle and causing any damage. Now the installation on this is pretty simple, so I'm going to walk you through all the steps, make sure you get yours installed. So let's take a look. To begin our installation, we're going to open up our hatch, and that way we can gain access to our tail lights. And we're going to be removing these plastic covers to get to the hardware. Now at the bottom portion, there's a little slot that allows you to get a flathead screwdriver. I'm going to be using a trim panel tool here, but similar concept. We're just going to pry these. Now just keep hold of all of your hardware. I do recommend having a nice organized spot to keep it because as we're pulling stuff off, it's going to make that reinstallation that much easier if we have everything available. So once we pop those off, that's going to give us access to the two 10mm screws on each taillight. So we'll go ahead and get those removed. Now with that hardware out, we should be able to just kind of get these loosened up by just kind of wobbling it back and forth, and that's going to allow us to get this to slide off. You have these alignment tabs here, so you're going to want to pull it straight back. You don't want to pull it at an angle and damage those clips. Now at this point, we're going to separate the taillight by unclipping it from the electrical connection. Just push down on that tab, and we should be able to get this to separate. We'll go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side. So we are going to eventually pull this plug up using a fish wire, and that way we can snap in here. But there is a plastic panel under here that it kind of has to go around, and I do worry that we're going to have it pretty tight underneath to make it difficult to attach our power wire. So I'm just going to do that now. That way we don't have to worry about trying to crimp wires underneath the vehicle. So grab the spool of wire that comes in the kit and the black power wire off the module, and we'll just strip these back. And something that's not included in the kit, but I highly recommend picking up, is some heat shrink butt connectors. And what that's going to do is once we crimp it down, we're going to heat it up with a heat gun, and that's going to seal around it, making a nice watertight seal. So for any electrical connection that's living technically outside the vehicle that can be exposed to any water or weather, this is just a great way to ensure that the wires stay protected and sealed up. So I'll just crimp this down and then get our heat gun to it. Now to pull the wires up, we're using an airline tube that we have here, but really if you have a string with a nut attached to it or anything that kind of feeds through here, to be able to tape up the wires and pull them up, it's going to make it a lot easier to get these in place. So I'll feed these under and grab a hold of the end of our wire. So once you have the bottom part of your fish wire pulled through, just tape this up. You're going to want to make sure to keep it as small of a footprint as possible, and also tape up your ground wire. That way it doesn't catch on anything. So we'll get this taped up. And when you pull this through, you're going to want to kind of help feed this up. It is kind of a tight spot here. So just don't pull too hard. You want to make sure that your tape holds on to it as you're making your way up. With our pull wire taken off, you'll see that part of our plug matches up directly to where our factory connection. It's identical, so we'll just take the other end and we'll just snap this in place. And the other end was going to go to our tail light, but we want to get our ground wire attached. And included in the kit is a self-tapping screw. We might be able to use this as a factory ground, but honestly a self-tapping screw, just kind of run it through here, should be a great option. And just a nice flat surface here. You know, a lot of times people are worried that it's not going to have a good contact without sanding this down. You don't necessarily need to do that, because as this bites into the metal, it's going to transfer through that. So just find a flat surface, and you don't want to get too tight here, because you can actually strip out those threads. So just make sure that that ring terminal isn't moving. So just a little bit more here. And just make sure it's tight enough to where that ring terminal is not going to move around, and that should be snug enough. So at this point, we'll take our taillight and we'll plug this in here. And then we can get this put back in place. So with that side plugged in, we need to grab our green wire, and we're going to run this over to our other taillight pocket and plug it in all the same. There's no ground wire to attach. We also have our 4-pole wiring that we're going to want to we have a dust cap that goes on the end of our 4-pole, and that can live on our safety chain loop. And that's going to be a good option. But when we run all this over, we want to make sure that it's not going to hit the muffler. So you can kind of utilize underneath. You can use the hitch to zip tie this wiring up to, but kind of get it at a good spot, get this plugged in, and then we'll pull the slack back and then mount up our module. So I'll go ahead and get our 4-pole and our passenger side routed, and then I'll show you how it looks. And when getting your 4-pole in place, you are going to probably see some of the exposed wires. So to clean it up, something you might want to do is get some wire loom and just kind of wrap that. It'll give it a little cleaner look. So with our passenger side plugged in, our 4-pole routed up, I was able to use the brackets that bolt up to the bottom of the bumper. They're just plastic ones. There's some nice loops that you can run the zip ties through to make it nice and tidy. So pull all your slack over, because we're going to bundle up all our excess wires and also get this mounted up. So there's 2 different ways you can mount this. I'm going to do both of them. So there's an adhesive double-sided that you can put onto the module. Our hitch has a hole on it that I'm also going to run zip ties through. That way, if this ever breaks down just from weather, it's still going to be holding up and not dragging down. Main thing is get all the excess wires zip tied up and nice and clean, so they're also not coming down. That all mounted up nice and clean. All that's left to do is get our power wire ran up to the battery. And on this vehicle, it's located on the driver's side. So as we run this underneath the vehicle, try to use factory wire loom. The main thing is you're staying away from any moving parts, suspension, exhaust, you have axles, and your drive shaft as well. So just make sure you find a nice clean path that the wire's not going to get damaged. I'll get that routed and show you the way that I took. Now, when running the power wire, I normally try to stay on the same side as the battery just to make sure we have enough slack. But unfortunately, on the driver's side, there's not a whole lot to attach to. So I kind of had to get a little bit creative, but I'm really happy. I think it's a safe way to route it. And the first thing I did is, since we start on this side, I kind of went through the hole here just to kind of keep this tucked away from the exhaust and causing damage. And I then just zip tied this up to the rear cross member, and just kind of utilize what's there as far as holes with zip ties. Made my way here on the cross member and then down to the strapping here on the gas tank. Now this tray makes for a pretty good running spot, so I just put some zip ties here. And then this underbody skid panel, this is a 12 millimeter. If you pull that off, tuck the wire behind it, and then put that back up, that's going to hold it in place. The same thing goes for these plastic push pins. And there's also a 10 millimeter here. So at this point, we've already made it up to our front engine bay here, and it's pretty wide open. We still have plenty of power wire left. So I'm going to use a fish wire to run that up, tucking it kind of behind some of this factory wire just to kind of keep it away from the axles that we have here and just any of the moving components of the engine bay. So I'll get this pulled up, and then I'll show you the rest of the connection. So I was able to get a pretty clean run here. I've pulled up my wires. Again, I tucked a lot behind a lot of the factory wires that were there, and you can see a zip tie. I just ran this along, and I got another zip tie here. There's some electrical stuff along the booster here, and then I just tucked my wires back behind this fuse panel and made my way over where I still have plenty of extra wire, and we're going to be attaching our fuse holder. So let's take a look at the fuse holder here. Now during this, you don't want to make sure the fuse is not in there until we have this completely hooked up. So I kind of want to get this mounted up clean here. One side is going to go to a ring terminal, the other is going to tie into our power. So I'll go ahead, I'm going to cut my wire back. And then we'll strip this back. And we'll take the ring terminal that's included in the kit and get this crimped down. Now we'll attach this. Now to get the positive nut on the terminal off, it's going to be a 12 millimeter socket. So get that loosened up. And then we'll place our ring terminal on here. I'm going to just kind of tuck this under here to give it a little cleaner look. And then we'll tighten this back down. So now we just need to make our connection to our power wire. And again, I'm going to be using one of our heat shrink butt connectors because this is in the engine bay. So we'll cut this to the length that we need. With those connections made, we can take our fuse and place it in our fuse holder. We'll cap this down. And we've officially installed our trailer wiring. Now, we do want to make sure that it works just before we just hook up to the trailer and hit the road. So we're going to be testing ours using a 4-pole tester. If you have your trailer handy, now's a good time to hook up to it, run through the light sequence, and make sure that it's working on the trailer and that all of the signals are transmitting properly. So now we'll start with our running lights. Next, we'll do our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and then finally our brakes. Now the 4-pole tester that we use is really nice because it keeps it specific to the vehicle. That way if your trailer has any faulty wiring, it could give you kind of a false negative that it's the wiring on the vehicle. So if you want, you can pick one of these up. But again, using your trailer is generally a good way to do it anyway. So with all of that working properly, that does it for our installation of our Curt trailer wiring harness on a 2023 Subaru Impreza.